Hello my friends and welcome. Let's go straight to the front lines because Ukraine gained some of the ground near to Dibrovo. We have the new advancement in this forest. Before, just yesterday, Ukraine advanced towards this place near to Dibrovo, and now over here the new achievement for Ukrainian army. As you can see, there are many of the forest roads, and I expect that Ukraine will continue the attack, probably locking the Russian group between the river and Ukrainian armed forces. At least I think it's the most probable tactics from the Ukrainian side in this place. Let's go to the 3D map. So this is the spot of the Ukrainian advancement. Let's go to the place from this perspective, and mostly here we can see that it's just the flat terrain, little bit elevation over here, but not significant. Obviously near to the river you may see that the ground is much lower, but the forest is on a higher ground, so no side has the advantage in elevation. So hopefully Ukraine will be able to lock the Russian army in this place. Let's go to the village of Marinka. For now, this territory is under Ukrainian control, so Russia claimed that they've took all of the Marinka around 3 days ago, but actually they shared the fake information about this place. They are unable to move forward for 2 consecutive days. Quite a controversial information is coming from Pisky. Some sources say that Russia is able to advance towards this place. Some sources say that the Ukrainian army was able to advance, taking this territory under control. Definitely hard to say. Hopefully we'll have more robust information for tomorrow. Alright, now let's go to the main hotspot on the front lines, Avdiivka. For today there was no any movement. However, as you can see, Russia still gets the ground under control. I think it's the update from the yesterday's Russian attack. It was repelled with the help of the Ukrainian forces. And you know, we have the deep analytics about this place from the deep state military map. They present this scheme with many of the Russian assault vectors. I think the most vulnerable as for Ukraine is not the Stepova, but the power plant located a little bit on the south. If Russia takes it under control, they would just block the supplies for Avdiivka place. The bad thing that even though Russian attacks are being repelled almost every time, but they're very constant with that. Each day they have many of the attacks one after another. So firstly they send the forces to Krasnogorivka. It's their main hub center in this place, and they created several of the small bridgeheads, and after Krasnogorivka they send the forces very close to the front lines, and after that directly to the front lines. The railroad helps them to prevent the movement or counterattacks from the Ukrainian side, so they also use those bridgeheads as the defense positions because they dig down to the ground, creating some of the trenches. So definitely it's hard for Ukraine to penetrate this place. We tried before, I think 1 week ago, the Ukrainian army even crossed the railway over here, but later on Russia sent more reinforcements and our guys were forced to leave their positions. And each time then the Russian army fails with their attack attempts, they go back to their previous positions. Russia already burned all of the resources that they thought would be enough to encircle Avdiivka. So they sent more reinforcements from the other parts of the front lines that shouldn't be used at this particular spot. From what I see, Russia is concentrated now on taking the forest lines under control and also the field roads. That might help them to secure their positions. For example, we have the forest line in this area, so they want to secure this place as well. And sometimes they attempt the attacks towards the power plant. As I said to you, it's the most vulnerable part, but at the same time it's the most defended part. This particular area is the place with the water pumps which are needed for this factory. The factory is not working obviously now, but Russia is trying to get at first this place under their control. For now there is no success for Russians, which is good. The deep state analytics say that the fight is ongoing. Russia wanted to get Avdiivka under control till the 4th of November, but the forces are already exhausted, as I say to you, so they continue to send reserves from the other places. Unfortunately, analytics admit that the quantity of the forces increased increased gradually. So now they have the advantage even with infantry over Ukrainian army in this place. But the good thing that the Russian attacks on the south are totally stalled. So Russia propelled forward in this industrial part, but was forced to stop. I think that for the last 5 days there are no any movement, maybe even for 1 week, and this is also the vulnerable direction for Ukrainian army because this vector goes directly to the city. It's the closest place to the city itself, but Ukraine was able to stop Russian advancement as well as over here. It means that the Russian army has no perspectives in encircling or taking Avdiivka under their control in 10 days. Why are those 10 days are so important? Because Putin is going for elections and he's going to announce it on 14th of December. All of the experts and analytics are saying about it, and I may also agree with them. Even though the Russian elections are fake, but the process itself is very important for the current Russian regime. We're gonna speak about it later. Okay, we have the latest news from Stepova. It's the northern flank of Avdiivka. It seems like Ukraine was able to repel the Russian attack. We used the infantry forces together with the armored vehicles and tanks. There was the Ukrainian surveillance and Ukrainian artillery on the place. So there was the fire exchange over here and Ukraine moved forward. Our guys were spotted over here and we burned some of the Russian armored vehicles right at the railway. Awesome news. I think the cluster munition helped a lot. Sometimes I read the Russian military bloggers and they are really fascinated about the losses that caused for them with the help of the artillery shells with cluster munition. Russia also has the cluster shells, but they use the aviation bombs for that. They mainly do not use the artillery shells with cluster munition, but the Ukrainian army is constantly using them. The clusters are not really effective against the trenches because you can hide and all of the shrapnel will fly on the top, but for the advancing infantry it is very effective. That is why the Russian attack was stopped over here, and it helped Ukraine to go on counteroffensive once again. Probably our guys gonna force Russians to retreat again to their positions near to Krasnogorivka behind the railway. Again, awesome news. Alright, it seems like Russia started to lose the ATV vehicles that were supplied by China to the Russian army. There is no any armor, nothing, and Russia uses those vehicles to supply the ammunition and other stuff to the front lines. You can see this is the forest. To target the Russian positions, Ukraine uses the Baba Yaga drone that is capable to carry many of those shells. This one didn't explode, but many did. And one more Chinese vehicle was lost for the Russian army. It hit just over this place, totally demolishing the car. It reminds me the golf cart, but definitely for its purpose, I think this vehicle is quite capable. The Ukrainian army is also uses the similar vehicles to deliver the supplies and also to evacuate the wounded soldiers. So who did this bombing? The Magyar drone team. It seems like there is the huge fire in one of the factories of the Moscow city. Well, this factory produces vans, tow trucks, trailers for transporting special equipment, and also they produce the watercraft. The Russian fire brigades are unable to extinguish this huge fire, and for now it grown by 2 times. It is definitely hard to tell what exactly was produced over there. Hopefully something connected to the Russian army. This video was filmed in the Kursk region of Russia, so here is the Niva vehicle that is used mainly to transport officers, and it was kaboomed with the help of the drone. I think it is the Ukrainian response on the Russian assault towards Sumy and Chernihiv Oblast. Recently, Russia activated their sabotage forces and they go to Ukrainian positions, ambushing the Ukrainian trenches. Probably they want to find out how capable the Ukrainian defense really is, and our guys this time went on the Russian territory, Kursk. It seems like Russia started to use more explosives on the Shahid drones. We're speaking about the thermobar shell that is more powerful, more devastating. Just 40 kilograms is enough to eliminate the half of the several-story residential building. Those kind of the shells Russia is using in their Sankt-Petersburg artillery systems. There were many talks that Poland will stop supplying weaponry to Ukraine, especially after some tensions between Ukraine and Poland before about the grains and now about the blockade of the border. But now we have the information that Poland has sent some of the crab artillery systems and is getting ready to send 56 more. Thank you, Poland, for supporting Ukraine. By the way, about the blockade of the border, Poland and Ukraine cooperated and forced the strikers to unblock some of the checkpoints. The south direction, Russia lost the BTR-82, usual thing, they sent lots of the infantry vehicles and Ukraine is ready for this scenario. Jens Stoltenberg is quite worried about Ukraine. He says that the situation with the supplies for Ukrainian army is critical. He says that we need to be ready for the bad news. The war has several stages and we need to support Ukraine at any stage, good or bad. Probably the bad news could be Avdiivka, because we know that Russia concentrated the large group of the forces in their third attempt to get that town under control. And they may start their advancement towards Avdiivka very soon, because as I said to you before, Putin needs to proclaim the victory before announcing himself as the candidate for the future president position. But not only Russia is losing their forces, unfortunately. This is the Ukrainian BTR-4E, and this footage was taken from the Russian FPV drone. As you can see, the drone was pointing towards the vehicle, and at that exact moment the vehicle ran on the anti-tank mine. And because of the smoke, the FPV drone missed that target. You can see it. There is no any BTR over here. Sadly, the Ukrainian army lost the vehicle after it hit the mine, but I think it has better mine protection compared to the FPV attack. In general, the BTR-4E is not that good vehicle. Basically, it is very big and clumsy. Maybe I'm gonna make the review about this one. Pentagon reports that their military ship plus some of the civilian vessels were attacked by some of the force. Pentagon officials do not specify the damages those ships sustained. The British Agency of the Sea Trade said that several ships were damaged because of the drone attack. Reuters says that 2 of the British vessels were attacked. One was the container carrying and the other one was the bulker. After all, it looks like the Houthi forces attacked on those ships. However, they do not claim responsibility of the attack on the United States Navy. The situation with mice on the front lines is just terrible. They are running everywhere. They are hiding in the warm places because it's cold outside for them. So they go to the trenches, they go even to the tanks. This is the Russian army tank, the Russian video, and they start the engine. Just look at how many mice are there in this tank, because the engine was quite warm before, so they went there to get warm a little, but it is, I think, the tank exhaust, and obviously they start to run away. To somehow solve the mice problem, Ukraine deployed some of the cats to the front lines. They're quite effective in catching some of the mice, and mice do afraid the cats. At least Ukraine may secure the provision, because mice destroy everything. Yes, I got bigger a little. I want to tell you about why the election process is so important for the Russian regime and Putin personally. We all might agree that Russia is not a democratic state. Even Russians and Z publics admit it. Sometimes they're even proud about it, but at the same time they have this ritual of elections. Yes, Putin may draw any kind of the number as the election result, but people might not believe in it. That is what happened to the Belarus self-proclaimed leader Lukashenko back in 2020. I have some of the friends in Belarus and many of them already left the country, but none of them and none of their friends or relatives voted for Lukashenko. In fact, the majority of the Belarus people didn't support Lukashenko, but Lukashenko wrote more than 90% voted for him. It's complete nonsense. So people became angry about it because all of their friends, all of their relatives did not vote for him. So people united with this idea that they didn't vote for Lukashenko, and some say that actually he got just 3% of support. People just got tired about this closed environment country where police and army has the most respect and the most power together with Lukashenko. The rest of the people are just nothing for Lukashenko's regime, they just use them. Living in Belarus is really hard for the ordinary people, much harder than in your country. So because of the word of mouth, people understood that Lukashenko wasn't really supported, and they start together in a large groups of protesters. However, the choice was made by people to protest peacefully. Really, there was no strong leader to manage the protest, to spark it into the big fire, as it happened, for example, in Ukraine in 2013, where the protest wasn't really peaceful, but it led to the change of the power in Ukraine. So the Belarus regime understood the weakness of the protesters and they start to use the force massively. Also, Putin helped a lot. Actually, only with the Russian support, Lukashenko was able to keep the power in Belarus. So the situation with Belarus shows that the fake elections do not work sometimes for tyrants or for dictators. Putin understands that. That is why all of the forces will be sent to support his rating. The best scenario for Putin would be to freeze this war, telling that Putin finished it because the majority of the population of the Russian Federation now do not support the war in Ukraine because they are suffering from the economical perspective. Actually, 70% of the population do not support it right now. But at the same time, Putin doesn't want just to get out from Ukraine, because in that case, more amount of people would not support him, basically because of the empire and chauvinist thinking that was spread by the Russian propaganda itself. So at this point, Putin is basically trapped with his actions by his own propaganda. And Ukraine obviously will not let him to freeze this war. That is why he needs the small achievement like taking Avdiivka or Marinka. And that's the reason for the war to intensify. The elections in Russia will happen in March, so Russia will throw all of the resources to manage something till elections. The main thing for Putin is to keep the real support. Maybe he would write like 90% of support, but he needs at least the majority to support him. If Putin gets like 30 or 40%, it would be the catastrophe for him personally, and many people would understand that the king is naked, that the elections are fake in reality. Most of the people in Russia understand that the elections are fake, but still majority of the Russian populations do support Putin. If during the next elections the support failed below 50%, there could be different scenarios for the Russian development. That's why you'll see the crazy program from the Russian regime. Actually, you already see it. Because of the absence of the real result on the front lines, even with Avdiivka, Putin has changed the enemy. Now the antagonist for Russia is not the NATO or Ukraine. The main enemy is LGBT. Yes, Putin, as the divorced man with many of the illegitimate children, calls for the family values. Interesting. And recently they activated this fight against the gay community. They close lots of the facilities. They even declare LGBT as the extremist organization, probably the first time in the world. Yes, there are still many countries in the world where LGBT or gays are forbidden, but they do not scream around the world that this is the Western propaganda, we need to fight against the LGBT. That is what Russia does. Yes, it is the total cringe that the government wants to see your sexual activity, which should be your private choice. But you know, it's Russia and they need the new enemy. As for instance, Israel became the new enemy for the Turkish president Erdogan. In fact, it's not the enemy and they continue to trade between each other, but this propaganda just helps Erdogan to consolidate the people around him. The same stuff goes for Putin's regime and gays. There are many gays in the Russian business, in the Russian politics, but they do not say openly about it. In general, this formula with enemy works for any kind of the country, but especially it works for the dictatorship countries. And since we are getting more closer to elections in Russia, you'll see even more cringe out there, especially if the Russian army wouldn't be able to achieve their goals on the front lines. You'll see many of the pro-Putin's concerts and you'll see how the Putin's party, United Russia, will pay tons of cash to feed the people temporarily just before elections. It usually happens like that. So hopefully you understand my point. Even with fake elections, Russia is not obviously able to maintain the current regime. But unfortunately, I think that the situation in Russia is not that dramatic for people to understand that they shouldn't be voting for Putin. So Putin has pretty much good chances to maintain his position after the elections. Plus, I think that the current Russian society is not ready to spark the huge fire of revolution. But you know what? For the last 150 years, there were at least 5 of the revolutions in Russia. And each time, no one was expecting those. And this time we have all of the ingredients for the revolutionary soup: the stupid waste of the human lives in the war, the stagnation of the country's economy, the dictator in power, and the isolation of the country. There are pretty much good chances for this soup to boil at some point. Well guys, hopefully you enjoyed this part of the video. Don't forget to press the like to this video, it helps me a lot. Also, if you want to support my channel, you may find some of the links in the video description just below. My friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.